Adolf Hitler would have spent his whole life as an obscure painter in Vienna. No one would remember Joseph Stalin. The Russian Empire would have survived to the present day. The Holocaust would never have happened. And all of it began with one chauffeur who on the 28th of June 1914 made one wrong turn. The morning was humid and warm, a typical Balkan summer. From the Miljachka River came the smell of algae and coal smoke. That single wrong turn killed 17 million people. It didn't have to.
I'm Crooked Timeline. I take the thinnest cracks in the past and show you the other world that could have grown from them. Today, 14 minutes of the chronicle of a world where the First World War never happened. A world where Lenin, Hitler, and Stalin simply don't exist in history. Where the Berlin Wall was never built because its causes never arose. This is the story of one turn that was never supposed to happen.
To understand what should have happened, you need to know what shouldn't have. The 28th of June is the anniversary of the Battle of Kosovo. For Serbs, it's a sacred date. And on this very day, Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, chose to visit Sarajevo, capital of Bosnia, annexed by his empire just 6 years earlier. It was a provocation. The Austrian administration knew it was a provocation and did nothing. That same day in Sarajevo, 7 young men from the organization called the Black Hand had gathered. Serbian nationalists trained in Belgrade. Each had a pistol, a grenade, and a cyanide capsule for the worst case. Their leader was a 20-year-old student, Gavrilo Princip. In the cafe where they waited that morning, the air smelled of strong Turkish coffee and tobacco smoke. Princip barely drank. His stomach was tight with fear. The other 6 were just as young, just as desperate. That morning of the 28th, everything went sideways for the conspirators. The first of the 6, Mohammed Mehmed Basic, didn't fire. The motorcade passed too quickly. The second, Vaso Kubrilovic, also hesitated. The third, Nedeljko Kabrinovic, threw a grenade. It struck the folded roof of the Archduke's car with a hollow metallic thud, bounced off, and exploded under the following vehicle. The sound was not loud, more like a heavy sack of grain dropped from an upper floor. Several officers were wounded. Kabrinovic swallowed his cyanide and jumped into the Miljachka River. The cyanide was expired. The river was shallow, knee-deep. They pulled him out with his throat torn open from vomiting. The Archduke was furious. He rejected the rest of the program and demanded to drive to the hospital to see the wounded officers. The route was changed on the fly. No one warned the lead vehicles. No one warned Leopold Lojka, the Archduke's chauffeur. Lojka received his instruction straight along the embankment. That was the new agreed route. Simple. Safe. Around 10:45, Lojka came to the intersection with Franz Joseph Street. And, inexplicably, he turned right, into a street no one had told him to enter. The car lurched at the turn. The leather upholstery creaked under the weight of the Archduke and Sophie. Lojka realized his mistake at once and pressed the brake. The engine coughed and stalled. 5 meters from that turn, by the Schiller Cafe, stood the 20-year-old Gavrilo Princip. After Chabrinovic's failure, he believed it was all over and had stepped inside to buy a sandwich. The bread was dark, the meat over-salted. He could barely taste it. In his right hand, in his coat pocket, his Browning had warmed against his body. He stepped outside and saw in front of him the stopped automobile with the Archduke and his wife Sophie. The distance? 1.5 meters. Princip took 2 steps. fired twice. Sophie died instantly. The Archduke, 10 minutes later.
Now picture it differently. Lojka does not turn. He drives straight, along the agreed route.
The car passes the Schiller Café at 30 kilometers per hour. Princip, weakened by stress and failure, remains standing with the sandwich in his hand. He sees the Archduke's face through the window, only for a second, blurred, and realizes, too late. He throws the half-eaten sandwich into a trash bin, walks slowly to the bridge over the Miljatska, and on the way, drops the Browning into the water. Within 3 hours, all 6 conspirators have left Sarajevo. No one shoots at Austria-Hungary. This is our point of divergence.
The 29th of June, 1914.
Morning papers in Vienna write of the failed assassination attempt and the successful conclusion of the visit. Censorship presents it as the triumph of Austrian will. Franz Ferdinand returns to Vienna a hero. That matters, because he was an heir toward whom the empire had been suspicious.
In our real history, Serbia was given an ultimatum.
In our alternative, there is no one to give one to. The crisis dissipates over 2 weeks. Russia does not mobilize. Germany is not forced to execute the Schlieffen Plan. The French do not declare a general alert. August 1914 in Europe is quiet. Students return to universities. The harvest is taken to market.
1915. Emperor Franz Joseph, at 85, continues to rule.
Franz Ferdinand is active in politics. He is married to the Czech Countess Sophie Chotek. For the Viennese court, a misalliance. But outside the court, Sophie is loved. Franz Ferdinand pushes trialism, a reform turning the empire from a dual monarchy into a triple one. Austria, Hungary, and Yugoslavia as 3 equal partners.
1916.
Franz Joseph dies in November, as in our history, but the throne is taken by Franz Ferdinand, 52 years old, with a finished plan for reform. His coronation in Prague, not Vienna, scandalizes the Hungarian nobility. And that is the deliberate signal. The empire is changing.
Russia at this time is not at war, and Nicholas II holds control.
The revolution of 1917 will not happen because there are no millions of armed, embittered soldiers on the front. Lenin remains in Zurich, writing pamphlets read by a narrow circle of social democrats. In 1918, he dies of a stroke, which would have happened in our reality too, had he not lived to take power.
In Germany, too, everything is different.
Without a defeat in war, without a shameful peace, without a million dead, there is no soil for radical movements. Adolf Hitler, rejected by the Vienna Academy, continues to make a living painting watercolors. In 1920, he moves to Munich. That actually happens. But without frontline comrades, without the bitterness of those around him, without stormtroopers, he remains a mediocre artist failure. The biographers of the future will never notice him. 1934. 20 years since that Sarajevo morning. Europe looks the way it might have looked from 1913. 4 large empires and a grid of small kingdoms. Austria-Hungary, now a triune monarchy. The Ottoman, reformed under pressure from the Young Turks, but still existing. The Russian, constitutional, with a Duma and a Tsar. The German, strong, industrial.
Without World War I, the national states born from its ruins never appear. There is no Poland and its modern borders, no Czechoslovakia. Czechs and Slovaks live within Austria-Hungary. No independent Baltic republics. Finland is still a Grand Duchy of Russia. The map of Europe looks like a late Victorian engraving, not a modern atlas. Technology went a different way. Without the military expansion of the 30s,
The accelerated development given by the Second World War does not happen. Radar appears later. Jet aviation, a decade later. Atomic energy is discovered in laboratories, but without a Manhattan Project, it remains a scientific curiosity until the 40s and 50s. Without 45 million dead from World War II, Europe in 1934 is richer than ours. Without the revolution in Russia, the Russian Empire continues its industrialization. By the 30s, it is the fourth economy in the world after the United States, Germany, and Britain. Without collectivization, agriculture develops organically, and Russia remains a key exporter of grain. Without repressions, no Gulag, which in our reality killed millions. Russia in 1934 is a country of banks, railways, and new universities. Colonial empires also survive. Without Britain and France weakened by war, the British Empire stretches from Cairo to Calcutta into the 40s and 50s. India does not gain independence in 1947. Africa does not split into 50 new states in the 60s. The world is divided into 4 spheres of influence, and the great powers carefully avoid direct conflict. But not everything is idyllic. Without the confrontation with fascism and political discourse, there is no immunity to authoritarian ideas. Without the defeat of colonialism, no global human rights movement. Without the shock of the Holocaust, anti-Semitism in Europe remains a background phenomenon into the 50s and 60s. This world is softer in one dimension, but harsher in another. And by the end of the 30s, new tensions are accumulating in it. Move forward to 2026, our year. In this alternative reality, a world in which 4 empires have survived to our day, with reforms, crises, with their own great depressions and thaws, but survived. The map of the world looks entirely different. Sarajevo, 2026. A quiet Yugoslav city within the triune Austria-Hungary Yugoslavia. The Habsburg eagle on the facade of the city hall. The Schiller Cafe is still open. It's a tourist landmark because historians remember, here, a great catastrophe could have happened, but didn't. Russia in 2026. A constitutional monarchy. On the throne sits Alexei III, great-great-grandson of Nicholas II. Parliament in St. Petersburg. The tech sector is strong, but without the Soviet leap into space and nuclear energy, there is no Roscosmos as we know it. Russia is a land of classical universities, ancient industrial dynasties, and those aristocratic families which in our history were shot or exiled. Germany. An industrial giant but not an aggressor. Kaiser Wilhelm IV, great-great-grandson of Wilhelm II, opens factories rather than issuing orders to the Wehrmacht. The Berlin Technical University is the best in the world. German cars dominate, as in our reality. But Berlin is not divided by a wall. There was no wall. There never was. The United States. A strong power, but not the sole superpower. There was no Pearl Harbor, no Manhattan Project, no Vietnam trauma. The American 20th century is a century of industry and Hollywood, but without global military expansion. The Cold War does not exist. There is no NATO, no United Nations. There is a far more multipolar world, and technologically, the world is behind. Without 2 world wars, without a space race, without defense budgets, computers appear 15 to 20 years later. The internet in our form does not exist until the early 2000s. Smartphones? Not until the 20s. In 2026, most people still use landline telephones and write letters. Video channels that tell alternate history do not exist because YouTube does not exist. This recording would be impossible in that world. We return to our world, to our 2026. We had a First World War, we had a Second, we had the Gulag, we had the Holocaust, we had Hiroshima. All these tragedies, the result of one wrong turn by one driver of one automobile on one June morning. Leopold Lojka died in 1926 from a heart attack, exactly 100 years before you are watching this. On his grave in Vienna, there was a simple stone cross, no inscription about what he did, only a name and 2 dates. Autumn leaves have settled on the stone every October morning for 100 years. And the Schiller Cafe in Sarajevo, it really exists, on the corner of Zelenih Peretki Street and Obala Kulina Bana. Only now it is a museum, and a plaque on the wall in 4 languages reads, "Here the 20th century began." What micro-divergence intrigues you? Write in the comments. The next Chronicle could be about it. And subscribe, because next Tuesday, I will tell you about a London doctor who, by accident, did not close his window in 1928, and how that mistake saved 1 billion lives.